Hey everyone, this is Pete Heiniger, and this is my wife, Cher Heiniger, and this is Stages Podcast. This is our fourth episode of season one, and we just got done and wrapped up a series on communication, and we're gonna kind of take a different direction today. We're gonna look at some things that you've been seeing. You've watched a couple interviews, and we're gonna talk about an author and a professor and somebody that we really find a lot in common with by the name of Kate Bowler. And so before we jump in, I just want to remind everyone, the Stages podcast is really for the purpose of changing the conversation and the stigma around cancer. Because there's a lot of different things, as you see just in this podcast, you're going to see there's a lot of things that you face as first, as caregivers, and as cancer fighters. And so we want to give both perspectives all the time, not just the cancer fighter, but also the caregiver who doesn't only just come alongside you in the fight, but also has a different fight of their own. And it's a different challenge that I face. And so we want to have both of those perspectives. So, hey, let's just jump right in. Cher, you found Kate Bowler, you listened to interviews, you've seen podcasts, and now you have her book, No Cure for Being Human. And so yeah, tell me about it and pick my brain.
So she has stage 4 colon cancer, and she has lesions in her liver as well. So in addition to the things we talk about today, she has that in common with you. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I wanted to, the first part I wanted to read is she's in the hospital. She's already received the diagnosis, but she's back in the hospital, and it's overnight. And someone comes in, at 3 a.m. and what's your
let's take your vitals.
What's your birth date? So that's the scenario, and she's speaking with a young doctor. And I'll just pick it up right here. She says, flustered, I tried to start again. The day before yesterday, a doctor's assistant called me on the phone at work to tell me that I had stage 4 cancer, but I don't know what those terms mean, except that it sounds like I am a spaghetti bowl of cancer. People keep saying lesions. I haven't had a chance to Google it. What are lesions exactly? Tumors. We're talking about tumors.
Yeah, that brings back all kinds of memories. On my cancer journey, just going in, and it seemed like every time I would go in 2019 and 2020, that they would just find I'd go in for one thing and they'd find something else. And so I remember when, we went in and for a totally different thing, I was getting a burning sensation in my chest, and it was due to some clotting things that were going on. But they scanned me, of course, and when they scanned me, they found the lesions on the liver. And of course, you don't have any idea unless you've been around the medical community or had somebody who's, fought through cancer or something, or familiar with it. You don't have any idea what are lesions on the liver. I mean, lesions sound like an abrasion or something like that. So you're just like, well, how did I get lesions on the liver, and too much craft beer or something like that? What is this from? And then then they finally go, oh, those are tumors. Mm-hmm. So that kind of begins your journey of, okay, what am I in store for and everything. And I think that begins the whole, from the medical community standpoint, trying to figure out, what are those lesions from? Are they actual liver cancer, or where's the source? So what's the source cancer? Yeah. So very words that just bring all kinds of things back to me as she went through them. I mean, just the uncertainty and everything. So yeah.
Then she has an episode where she's in the gift shop of the hospital, mm-hmm. and she sort of berates a poor teenager worker and the manager about the kind of books that are in the hospital gift shop, and their prosperity gospel books. And then she says, the American admiration for bootstrappers and optimists became a capitalist paradise. Everyone is now a televangelist of the gospel of good, better, best. Harness your mind to change your circumstances. The salvation of health and wealth and happiness is only a decision away. Will you finally let it save you? But I cannot outwork or outpace or outpray my cancer. I can't dispel it with a can-do attitude.
Yeah. This is something we've written a little bit about, we've talked about, but again, I feel exactly, the same way as she does. We have, I think we have very well known, like she mentions in there, I think Joel Osteen and stuff like that, who are very, well known prosperity gospel people. But I think that's kind of crept into our everyday language just in the church. We have a lot of this whole thing of like, I can just focus my mind a certain way if I can, go through the right system, system of things to do in my head, then I should just be able to cruise through this. And to any degree in which I am not cruising through it or whatnot, then I'm actually, I'm struggling with faith, or I've got to, I got to improve, a certain way that I approach life. But the truth is that like, it's a denial of being human, right? I mean, like, it is okay for you to face cancer and to be depressed. It is okay for you to face cancer and to have like a really hard mental health, issue. It's to be expected. It's human. It's okay for you to be sad. It's okay for you to be angry. It's okay for you to be questioning God and asking, why, what does God want from me? Like, these are things that are just human responses to something that is very tragic that's come into your life. Like, I might die. I don't know how much longer I have to live on this earth. And so you almost feel forced by the books and by the language. And then I think the thing is that a lot of people who haven't gone through cancer, haven't gone through like a life-threatening disease, but read these books all the time. It kind of creeps in, and that starts to form these cliches that come at you. And like, just pull it through. You gotta, it almost feels like rub some scripture on it, and you're gonna be okay. And that's just very, very disheartening to somebody who's in a long battle and a long fight and a long journey, right? I mean, it's almost like you have to keep this positivity, and you can't be real, and you can't admit what you're going through, and that's very dehumanizing.
So she says here, there are two versions of this belief prevalent in America, each drawn from a different well of scripture, tradition, and experience. In the first, more therapeutic account, God has a plan to make us happy. Influenced by the prosperity gospel in our self-help age, this version preaches that divine forces are participating in a loving conspiracy to keep us on an upward chosen trajectory. God is nudging us towards careers, partners, and dreams with which further our immediate and ultimate goal. In the second, more deterministic account, God has a plan for our betterment, but not necessarily our happiness. Before the foundations of the earth, God ordained our lives and directed our steps, and everything that may seem accidental or incidental, good or bad, will someday be revealed to be part of God's best hopes for us. But in the meantime, we will have to trust that the plan is good, regardless of how it appears. We suffer, we are heartbroken, we lose more than we can afford. I have met countless people suffering who find this belief in God's plan to be deeply comforting. In this moral universe, God allows our sorrows to instruct us before drawing us into heaven with no tears.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with both approaches, right? We've talked a little bit about the kind of self-help, will yourself deal that, but I think the second one, the determinist view is something that's very, very common, because it just kind of puts everything into God's hands, and then it's just part of this big huge plan. Of course, that's not eked out in scripture at all. If you read the scriptures, there's several times where God wanted to be done. God says in the Bible, the Old Testament, like he regrets having created humans in some places. So there's this idea that God is never caught off guard. He's not like surprised by humanity and what we do. But there's also the side of, and he can have a plan to accomplish his will in something, right? So he can accomplish the will. He wants to offer us forgiveness. He wants to offer us salvation. He's going to do whatever it takes to get there. And so you can see his will at work, kind of working with us as free will beings. But I think, to then ascribe that there's God's will in sort of, every single thing that ever happened, I think all you have to do is find some point in history where you could define a story that is absolutely pure evil. Somebody did something that, like, 99% of the population would be, oh, that's terrible, that's evil, that's pure evil. And then try to say that was God's will. That somehow, like, oh, he needed, the Jewish people in Auschwitz to go and get gassed in the chamber, and somehow that was going to, create some good. No, that grieved God. God was completely against that. That's part of man's depravity and his fallenness, but that doesn't have anything to do with him. Can he take those situations, and then, help people recover from that? Yeah, lots of people who survived Auschwitz went on to become huge voices in our society and have recovered from it, did have a life after that. But that's a far cry from saying that God somehow designed Hitler to rise up and do those type of things. And so, yeah, I totally reject the terminus view. That there's just all these little meticulous control details that God has set in place. His will is wide, but he risked relationship with us by giving us free will. And that means that we have the ability to choose to love him or to reject him. And people actually choose to reject him and choose not to follow him.
Then the last section of the book is about when they finally get to leave and go home, leave the hospital and go home. I did not realize how much I wanted a blueprint for how to live until the day I was released from Duke University Hospital. I had pushed the doctors to let me go home, and I was elated to be leaving right up until the nurse pushed my wheelchair through the doors. When I saw Tobin and my dad, fear hit me with the first blast of fresh air. They hopped out of the car and looked at me apprisingly, trading notes with the nurse about how to stand me up and sit me down again without tearing the stitches in my abdomen. Dad, I said too quietly, Dad. Tobin was tossing my bags into the trunk, and my dad was adjusting the front seat to give me more legroom. He glanced over. How will I know if I'm doing this right? I said in a low voice. Doing what right? He said. He buried his head buried under the seat. I am suddenly embarrassed by the answer. Live. I'm not sure I know how to do that anymore.
Yeah, that's probably the most relatable thing that she says. Here she's having a conversation with her dad, with her husband, sitting there listening, and she is put in that position of, just how do I know that how to make it through here, right? It's kind of the thing that we talked about. I remember being at an event. I don't remember. I just remember it was in California, in kind of the time period. But I remember even the speaker's name. And I remember that his wife was suffering cancer and had terminal cancer. And he was talking about how he encouraged her to learn how to die well. And it sounds bad. It sounds like, wow, that's heartless. But what he meant is that there's some way, if there's some way that we can show the world and the people around us that I can live with hope, that is just a beautiful thing, because a lot of people don't have hope. And I can say that I'm sure Kate has seen it, I've seen it, but when I'm in hospitals and I'm at the radiation, I see people who are at their worst. They're at their wit's end, and that's not any fault of their own, but they're not walking with hope. They're angry. I've seen lots of angry people, very disgusted, angry. We were in one waiting room, and we thought the guy was going to come to fisticuffs with the front desk person. It was just, it's just a place of frustration and really without hope. When people are without hope, they just become angry at their circumstances and stuff. So I really appreciated what that speaker had to say, because I think that's one of the things that has impacted me is, there's a lot of choices we get in life, but then how do I choose to take this setback or this potential threat on my life and live in a way that demonstrates hope, right? And I think the first thing that we learn is that we can't do it alone. I think Kate's going to probably talk about that, is that you've got to get, I have to have a great caregiver and Shara. I've got to have friends and people that are around me that help me. But I mean, these things are so important because they help remind me, right? I think one of the things that we struggle with our humanity is that when we think about Jesus and his presence, sometimes we lose sight of it because of the circumstances. It's a terrible week of radiation. I just am not feeling it. I don't. So in a way, if you can run with me with this illustration, Jesus becomes blurry to me. The Jesus that maybe in a great week I was, just completely, had my strong belief and it felt like he was part of my life and he was doing that. In a week of hardship, it starts to become blurry and I start to have questions and I can start to waver. But when caregivers come in and when friends come in and when I get encouraged and when I see people and they make comments and things, it's such a hope-giving moment, because in a sense they're like a visible, tangible representation of Jesus in my life. It's like they're here because Jesus brought them into my life, right? And so I look at all of those good things that he's given me and I can see his hand in there, right? So he's actually encouraging me through their actions and through their consistent love and through their, tough talks or listening to me or however way they're showing up for me that week, right? And I think that's one of the hardest challenges. What about you from a caregiver's perspective? Like, these things aren't just true about me, but like when you see, like, how do we live when you're facing the challenge of being a caregiver but working full time and doing all these things, and then watching me go through a rough week like this week and stuff like that. How does that affect you?
It's a lot. It's just the roller coaster of emotions. I say that a lot. But I also try to give myself the time and space to deal with those emotions instead of stuffing them, because that's sort of like my MO as well as my what I was around growing up. So I do a lot of journaling, angry running or angry walking, different things like that to deal with my emotions. And that's because of the fact that I know that those emotions are from God, and he's helping me deal with all those emotions, and he can take whatever I give him emotion wise. But at the same time, I don't want the my overflow of in not dealing with my emotions to negatively impact others. So that's one of the things I'm working on a lot, is just trying to be mindful of my emotions and deal with them at the time, so that I can be more helpful, more encouraging in the moment, but also real.
Yeah. And it's hard. I always want to say something, is that sometimes, we reduce, you ask the question, how can we come alongside somebody that's fighting with cancer? I've got a good friend, or I've got a loved one, or how do I come alongside someone and really truly be an encouragement to that family? And I think one of the things that is true is that I think you have to prepare yourself, because it's not easy. I think we want to make it like, oh, I have the perfect word, or I can come over and this is great. And some those experiences are true. People bring over a meal or they show up and you have fun. And those, I mean, those are definitely things that happen. But you can all of a sudden, if you hang out with somebody, you really walk out that journey with them on a weekly basis. Cancer fighters, when they're going through a tough week, they're trying to be honest with you, and you're asking how they're doing. It can sound like they're just negative, right? It can sound like, because, I can either answer your question dishonestly and just say, I'm fine. I got it, and sometimes we as cancer fighters are always trying to read that in people. we're trying to see, like, is this someone who really wants to know how I'm doing, or are they just, kind of, that's their MO, as they show up and they say, hey, how's it going, or how are you doing, are you doing okay? And so you have to kind of change your answer, so to speak, on how you answer. You might say, yeah, I'm fine, I'm powering through, or something like that. And other times you might be able to be, a little bit more open, but you're always worried about being too negative, right? And I think that's one of the things that, if you are in for the long haul, you've got to be able, that's kind of part of the equation, because the reality is they didn't just go into a hospital, have an operation, now everything's gone, right? This is a weekly, daily, up and down battle. And if they're in a good week physically, they're probably battling something mentally, because physically you kind of takes your mind off of everything. All you can think about is like the pain that you're in. Then if you start to feel better, then you're still consumed with the fact that, like, my life expectancy is uncertain, I might pass away, there's all these things. And then what does that look like for my wife or my kids, or different things like that. So it's a challenge to walk the journey. And so that's one of the things we want to be open and honest with, is that it's a really big deal. It is really, really, truly something that is one of the greatest ways in which you could serve a friend and loved ones and a family, is to come alongside them. But we also want to say, like, we're not easy. It's hard, right? Because it is just, Kate is pouring out, like, in her writings, I don't know how to live. I don't know how to do that. How do I show people when I feel like I'm inadequate, and I feel like and that question in and of itself is back to that dehumanizing thing, right? She wants to put on the game face, and, we're going to go out and fight. And she does fight, I'm sure. But the other side is that some weeks that fight looks like sadness and depression and fear, and I think it's because she's human. And I think that's the thing too, is that we have to realize the humanity of the people that we're working with, and that isn't a slack on their character. Sometimes our expectations are formed by those books. Sometimes they're formed by the fact that we just want to have some cookie cutter, wonderful, bright, shiny answer for something that's really difficult, right? And it would make everyone feel better if this cancer fighter and this caregiver could just be super happy. And I'm just going to tell you, at least from my experience, that if they put on happiness all the time, that means that they're stowing away and compartmentalizing all the things, because there's still fear, they're still scared, they're still depressed. They're just not showing it to anyone. And that's worse, right? That's a terrible place to be, because you really, really do feel all alone, right? So, hey, we want to continue talking about that. We're gonna look at a few more things that Kate talked about, but I just love the similarities. She's got the same cancer as I do, got the same lesions thing that I did, and went through a lot of those firsts, and then is really struggling with kind of the culture's response to, like, books and self-help and everything. And so we find a lot in common, like with her and what she's saying. And so again, we want you to be informed, because I think this is an important conversation, or stages wouldn't exist. We really want to change the conversation, because we want you to think about, like, where did you get your approach? Was it from something that you see as an example in scripture? Do you feel like it's the best thing, or did you get it from someone, and maybe you're trying to force positivity and some things into a place which really is just trying to ask, it's dehumanizing the person and telling them not to be human when their suffering is okay. It's okay to go through and express and talk about. So we love you. We're excited about getting more into this conversation, because some of the stuff we're going to get into next is going to go into more, critical ways in which that kind of roosts itself in our lives. But I think the takeaway that we wanted to have for you is that you you are a huge reason why people have hope. So don't diminish your ability to bring hope to people's lives when you come alongside them, when you fight. If you're a cancer fighter, you are a huge tool for hope. When you show hope, when you show resilience, when you're raw, when you say, I'm broken, like I just can't go do it this week. I'm scared. When you cry, when you express yourself as a human being, all those things that are valid, that's still bringing hope to other people. They're watching you and going, oh, this fight is hard, and yet they're still they're putting one foot in front of the other as best they can. And then you get to watch this beauty of combining those two things, right? The cancer fighter and all the people that are supporting them. And that's how you make it through life. And really, that's a picture of the church. It's really a picture of what God intended the church to be, that we're all in it together. And when someone needs help, we all rush to help them, right? So we love you, and we hope you have a good week. All right.